Chosen one, what I'm about to say may feel almost impossible to receive, and I understand why. You've lived with the quiet belief that somehow love always belonged to other people more than it belonged to you. Even when someone cared, a part of you kept wondering if they would still stay once they saw how tired you really were. But I need you to hear this before anything else settles into your heart. God loves you with a depth that goes far beyond what you've allowed yourself to imagine. This is not distant kindness or reluctant mercy. It is a fierce, personal love that has never once looked away from you. There is a reason that love feels so personal, and it reaches back to a moment you may have almost forgotten. It wasn't the day everything worked out or the season when you seemed strong to everyone around you. It was something much quieter than that, something the world would have easily overlooked, yet heaven never did. Stay with me, because once you see that moment through heaven's eyes, you may never look at your own story the same way again. For so many years you've measured yourself by what you could carry, what you could fix, and how much of yourself you could give away before anyone noticed you were running empty. You became the dependable one, the steady one, the person who always found the strength to keep going. Yet underneath that strength lived another question you rarely spoke out loud. If people ever saw the part of you that was exhausted, discouraged, or quietly falling apart, would they still love you with the same tenderness? That question has followed you longer than you realize, which is why believing that God delights in you feels almost too beautiful to accept. Maybe you've spent years trying to earn what was already being offered. Maybe you've mistaken constant striving for faithfulness, but the truth waiting for you is far gentler than that. The moment that captured heaven's heart was never your greatest success. It happened during the season when you felt like there was almost nothing left inside you. I think you remember it. The room was quiet. You were carrying more than anyone knew. You had every reason to stop, every reason to close your heart, every reason to believe that simply surviving would be enough. And yet, you kept choosing what was right. You still whispered a prayer, even when the words felt heavy. You still showed kindness when no one would have blamed you for becoming bitter. You still gave what little strength remained, because loving had become part of who you were, even when it cost you everything. That was the moment heaven never forgot. Anyone can remain hopeful when life is overflowing. It's easier to believe when every prayer seems answered and every step feels blessed. But there is something sacred about the person who continues to love from an empty place, who keeps showing up after disappointment, who stays faithful when no applause ever comes. That kind of love asks for nothing in return. It simply gives, because that is the true language of the heart. When heaven witnessed that part of your story, it didn't see someone barely holding on. It saw a soul revealing its truest nature. It saw a love that had been refined until only what was real remained. What you believed was your weakest chapter became one of the most precious moments heaven has ever held close. If something inside you is beginning to stir, if a forgotten memory is quietly finding its way back into your heart, pause with me for a moment before we go any further. Leave these words in the comments. I gave from empty. Not because you need recognition from anyone here, but because sometimes your own heart needs permission to remember what heaven has always remembered. That you kept loving when it would have been easier to let go. This is what I hope you begin to see. God's love has never been built on your performance. It has always responded to the truth of your heart. That hidden moment when no one else knew what it cost you to keep believing, revealed more about who you are than every achievement you've ever collected. The version of you that heaven treasures most is not the polished person the world applauds. It is the weary, faithful soul who chose love even when love seemed to bring nothing back. There is one more truth I want to gently place before you. If you struggle to feel this love, it doesn't mean it was ever missing. Love has surrounded you far longer than you've realized, yet something inside you has struggled to receive it fully. That is why a person can be deeply loved and still feel painfully alone. That is why heaven can be whispering your name, while your own heart hears only silence. As we continue, hold one question quietly within you. What if the deepest problem was never the absence of love at all? What if the part of you that knows how to receive love has simply grown weary after so many years of surviving? Stay with that thought. We're going to return to it, but before we go any further, I want to take you back to that season you would probably rather forget. Not to reopen an old wound, but because there is something about that moment you have never been allowed to see from heaven's perspective. I believe that when you finally do, something you've carried quietly for years will begin to loosen, and your heart will understand itself in a completely different way. The ache of feeling unloved leaves traces that are easy to miss because they slowly become part of who you think you are. Maybe you became the one everyone leaned on because somewhere along the journey, being needed started to feel safer than simply being loved. You learned how to pour into everyone else's life while quietly convincing yourself that asking for comfort would only make you a burden. You became so skilled at saying, "I'm okay," that sometimes you answered before you even knew whether it was true. There were nights when the house finally grew quiet, when the conversations were over and no one needed anything from you, and only then did you notice how exhausted you really were. Somewhere deep inside, another question kept whispering. One you rarely allowed yourself to say aloud. If I stopped carrying everyone else, would anyone still choose to stay with me? That quiet question is exactly where healing begins, because the deepest wound was never simply feeling unseen by people. It was believing that even God loved you in a distant, general way, the way the whole world is loved, while secretly wondering whether he could ever look at you personally, by name, with genuine delight. You have never struggled to believe that God loves humanity. What has felt almost impossible is believing that his heart rests on you with that same tenderness. The thought feels too personal, almost too beautiful to trust. Yet I need you to stay with me here, because this is where everything begins to shift. Chosen one, your faithfulness during your emptiest season was never forgotten. Heaven did not simply notice it for a passing moment. It has remained precious ever since. You are not loved as part of a crowd. You are known personally, remembered personally, and loved with a depth that reaches far beyond what your weary heart has been able to receive. Go back for just a moment to that season when everything inside you felt empty. You believed no one understood what it cost to keep moving. You thought your prayers disappeared into silence, that your quiet obedience unfolded in an unnoticed room. But what looked lonely on earth was anything but lonely in heaven. There was a holy stillness surrounding that moment because something sacred was unfolding. Every small act of faith carried more weight than you realized. Every time you chose kindness instead of bitterness, every time you whispered one more prayer after disappointment, every time you kept loving when nothing seemed to come back to you, heaven saw the beauty hidden inside those choices. Your faithfulness revealed something far greater than endurance. It revealed that your love had become genuine. It was no longer dependent on comfort, recognition, or visible rewards. It came from a heart that had learned to love simply because love had become part of its nature. Many people find it easy to praise when life feels abundant. Hope comes naturally when every door seems open, but there is something profoundly sacred about the soul that keeps saying yes even when the path grows quiet, even when the answers seem delayed, even when every outward reason to continue has disappeared. Without realizing it, you answered one of the deepest questions a human heart can answer. Would you continue loving even when nothing appeared to return your love? During the hardest chapter of your life, your answer became visible not through your words, but through the way you continued showing up. Heaven never measured that season by what you lacked. It remembered it because of what you still chose to give. I want you to receive something that may completely change the way you remember those years. The season you have called your weakest may have been the season your heart shone most clearly. While you looked back and saw yourself barely holding together, heaven looked back and saw extraordinary faith expressed through ordinary moments that no one else noticed. Your empty season was never evidence that you had failed. It became the place where the deepest part of your love was revealed. What felt like having nothing left became the moment you offered something that could never have been given from comfort alone. Heaven was never farther away during that time. If anything, it was closer than you could have imagined. You were never more deeply seen than when you believed no one saw you. You were never more deeply loved than when you questioned whether you were lovable at all. God's love did not suddenly appear because you finally proved yourself worthy. It had always been surrounding you. That difficult season simply uncovered the beauty of a heart that heaven had treasured all along. If something inside you has quietly shifted, if you're beginning to see that season with different eyes, let this moment become a marker in your story. Leave these words in the comments. It was my finest hour, not because those days were easy, but because you're choosing to stop remembering yourself only through weakness and begin seeing what heaven saw all along. Now there is another truth I want to place gently into your heart, because this is where real healing begins. The reason you struggled to feel loved has never been because you were unworthy of love. It is because the part of you that receives love has grown weary after years of carrying more than anyone knew. Giving became so familiar that receiving slowly began to feel uncomfortable. You learned how to comfort everyone else, while quietly forgetting how to rest inside someone else's care. Love kept reaching toward you, yet exhaustion had built such thick walls around your heart that even genuine affection sometimes struggled to find its way in. This is the hidden sorrow carried by many people who spend their lives pouring into others. They become so practiced at giving that they no longer recognize what it feels like to simply receive. They can stand in the middle of love and still feel strangely untouched, not because love is absent, but because survival has taught their hearts to stay guarded. That changes the story completely. Feeling unloved has never been proof that you were unloved. It has never been evidence that something was wrong with your worth. The love has always been there. What has grown tired is your ability to recognize it, and a weary heart can learn to receive again. You do not need to become more deserving of God's love. You already are deeply loved beyond anything you fully understand. What is healing now is your capacity to let that love finally reach the places that have remained protected for so long. That is a very different journey from the one you believed you were fighting. Before we continue, I want you to imagine something. Imagine what life would feel like if your heart could finally receive the love that has quietly followed you through every season, even the ones you thought were empty. Hold that picture gently, because we're almost ready to step into it. But there is one more thing your heart needs to know first. When someone who has lived emotionally numb for a long time begins to feel again, the first emotion that often rises is not happiness, it is grief. All the moments you swallowed your tears so you could keep functioning. All the times you needed someone to ask how you were really doing. All the loneliness you tucked away just to survive may begin rising to the surface. Please don't mistake that for failure. It is part of healing. A heart waking up after years of protecting itself often feels the ache before it feels the freedom. Just as warmth returning to a hand that has gone numb can bring discomfort before relief, your heart may release tears before it discovers peace. So if love begins reaching places inside you that have felt silent for years, welcome whatever comes. If tears find you, let them come without shame. They are not evidence that you are breaking apart. They are often the quiet sign that your heart is remembering how to receive again. Give yourself permission, even now, to feel whatever rises inside you. You don't have to carry this part of the journey the way you carried every season before it. The strength that helped you survive was necessary then, but what your heart needs now is something entirely different. It needs the quiet courage to receive love without apologizing for it. Chosen one, allow heaven to love you the way it has longed to. Let the people who truly care about you draw a little closer instead of gently pushing them away. You don't have to answer, "I'm fine," before you've even checked in with your own heart. The same bravery that once helped you keep giving when you had almost nothing left can now become the courage to open your hands and simply receive. This is the next step of your faith, and it may be the most vulnerable one yet. Imagine waking up a few months from now, before the world begins asking anything from you. The room is still quiet, morning light settles softly around you, and before a single thought of responsibility arrives, something else reaches you first. You feel loved. Nothing outside has suddenly become perfect. The circumstances may look much the same as they do today, yet something inside you has changed so deeply that the love which has always surrounded you finally has a place to rest. Instead of waking with that familiar ache you carried for so many years, you wake with a quiet certainty that no longer needs to defend itself. I am loved. I am wanted. I am chosen by name. That single realization changes far more than your emotions. It changes the way you move through every ordinary day. You stop measuring your worth by how useful you can be, because you no longer believe your value has to be earned. Love is no longer the prize waiting at the end of your effort. It becomes the place you begin from. There is a profound difference between giving because you're afraid of losing love and giving because your heart is already full of it. One leaves you drained no matter how much you offer. The other leaves you strangely alive because what flows through you is no longer borrowed strength, but the overflow of a heart that finally knows it belongs. As that foundation settles inside you, your relationships begin to change in ways you never expected. The walls you built so carefully begin to soften, not because you force them down, but because they are no longer protecting the same fear. Being seen no longer feels dangerous. When you believe you are already deeply loved, you begin allowing people to care for you in the small ways you once quietly resisted. You accept kindness without feeling guilty for needing it. You let someone ask how you're doing, and this time you answer honestly. Little by little, you discover that some of the people closest to you have been waiting for years to love the parts of you that never believed they were safe enough to be seen. What once felt like loneliness begins revealing itself for what it truly was. It wasn't always the absence of love. Sometimes it was the impossibility of receiving the love that had been reaching towards you all along. As your heart opens, relationships that once felt one-sided become places of genuine mutual care, where both people are finally free to give and to receive. There is another change, and perhaps it is the deepest one of all. Your relationship with God becomes something warmer, quieter, and infinitely more personal. Prayer no longer feels like speaking into endless silence. It begins to feel like resting in the presence of someone who has been listening all along, someone whose delight in you has never depended on your performance. Beneath every longing you've carried, beneath every season of striving, this is what your soul has been searching for. Not simply the ability to love God more, but the freedom to finally experience what it means to be loved by Him. That realization begins healing places inside you that words alone could never reach. And as your heart learns to receive, the people closest to you experience healing too. They no longer feel as though every expression of love disappears behind invisible walls. The quiet coat of self-protection you've worn for so long begins to fall away, and those who have loved you faithfully are finally able to reach the person they've always hoped to hold close. Your healing becomes a gift that extends far beyond yourself. It allows love to move freely where fear once interrupted it. It teaches your home, your friendships, and your family a new rhythm, one where affection flows in both directions instead of only one. If your heart can already glimpse that future, don't let the moment pass without honoring it. Leave these words in the comments. I am madly loved. Speak them as a chosen one who is beginning to receive what has been true all along, not as someone trying to convince heaven to love them. You are not the first person whose quiet faithfulness has moved the heart of God. Remember the widow who stepped forward carrying only 2 small coins. Others gave from abundance and were quickly forgotten, but she offered everything she had, and heaven never looked away from her sacrifice. The world measured the size of her gift. Heaven measured the love inside it. That is why her story has echoed through generations, while so many greater offerings disappeared into history. Love given from emptiness carries a beauty that comfort can never imitate. Chosen one, Your story carries that same quiet holiness. You have judged yourself by how little you believed you had left to give, while heaven remembered the cost your love was willing to bear. What you offered during your weakest season mattered far more than you have ever understood. You are not standing on the edge of God's affection, hoping to be noticed someday. You are already held at its very center. The part of you that still questions whether that could possibly be true is simply waiting to awaken to what heaven has known from the beginning. Now we're arriving at the question we've been quietly carrying together from the very start. We've uncovered the shape of the wound. We've seen how years of surviving can leave a heart unable to recognize the love surrounding it. Before we go any further, hold on to this understanding, because the answer only becomes meaningful once you truly recognize the depth of what has been waiting to heal. There is a bridge your heart has been searching for, chosen one, and it is gentler than you imagined. For a long time you believed that if you couldn't feel deeply loved, then something inside you must have been missing. But what if your heart has simply been carrying more weight than it was ever meant to hold? What if years of surviving taught you how to keep moving forward, yet quietly made it harder to recognize the love that never stopped reaching for you? Think about the way a child receives love. There is no calculation, no hesitation, no question about whether they deserve it. They simply rest inside it. Somewhere along the road, life asked you to become strong, dependable, and resilient. And those beautiful qualities helped you survive. Yet while you were learning to protect your heart, a part of you slowly forgot how safe it once felt to simply receive. That is why this has never been a story about failure. It has never meant you disappointed God or somehow drifted beyond His affection. The tiredness you have carried is real. The emotional numbness is real. The years of pouring yourself into everyone else have left quiet places inside you longing to be filled again. And there is deep hope in realizing that what has grown weary can also be restored. You cannot force your heart to feel loved through effort alone. Love has never responded to striving. It reaches you most deeply when your heart no longer believes it has to earn what has always been freely given. Healing begins the moment you stop asking, "How do I become worthy?" and start asking, "Can I allow myself to receive what has been here all along?" Chosen one, if you've tried to outrun this ache before, if you've searched for answers and still found yourself returning to the same quiet emptiness, I understand why you feel tired. Carrying hope after disappointment requires courage, yet the answer has never been found in trying harder to manufacture a feeling. It has always been found in allowing the walls built by survival to soften, little by little, until love can finally reach the places that have been waiting for it. The deepest current of this message has never been about discovering something outside yourself. It has always been about remembering what has been true since the beginning. God's love has never moved closer to you because you finally did enough. It has remained steady through every season, surrounding you even on the days when your own heart could not recognize it. So let us return to what matters most. I want to speak to the person beneath every disappointment, beneath every exhausting season, beneath every moment you questioned your value. I want to speak to the person heaven has always known. Chosen one, you are the beloved. You are not spending your life trying to become someone worthy of love. You are slowly waking up to the truth that you have always been loved, even on the days when you felt forgotten. Before you ever searched for love, it was already surrounding you, holding you more faithfully than you realized. You are also the faithful one. In a world where affection often rises and falls with circumstances, you continued loving through seasons that asked everything from you. You stayed when walking away would have been easier. You kept praying when silence felt overwhelming. You kept showing kindness when your own heart was quietly running on empty. Heaven has never overlooked those moments. The love that rests over your life is not pity, and it is not a reward you finally earned. It is the natural response to a heart that continued choosing love when comfort disappeared. What you offered during those hidden seasons was precious beyond anything you could measure. and heaven has remembered every quiet act of faithfulness you thought had been forgotten. Your healing will become more than a blessing for you alone. As your heart learns to receive, you will discover a different way of loving the people around you. No longer from exhaustion, no longer from fear of losing your place in their lives. You will love from abundance because what fills your heart naturally begins to overflow into others. The people closest to you will meet a version of you they have quietly hoped to know for years. They will encounter someone who no longer gives simply to earn acceptance, but because love has become the place they live from. A heart that once felt like a dry well slowly becomes a spring that never has to force itself to keep flowing. Carry this with you into your ordinary mornings. Before the responsibilities begin, before the messages, the conversations, and the expectations of the day arrive, give yourself a few quiet moments simply to receive. Sit in the stillness. Breathe deeply. Remember that your first calling each day is not to prove your worth, but to rest in the love that has already claimed you. Chosen one, you have spent enough years pouring yourself out before allowing your own soul to be filled. Let today become the beginning of a gentler rhythm. Fill the well before you draw from it. Receive before you give. You may discover that this simple shift changes far more than you ever imagined. Begin each morning by allowing yourself to receive before you ask yourself to give. Before the demands of the day begin pulling at your attention, sit quietly for a few moments and remember that you are already loved. When your heart begins from that place, you stop pouring from exhaustion and begin living from a fullness that quietly renews itself. There is one more practice I hope you will carry with you, chosen one. There will be days when that old voice returns, the familiar whisper that says, "You are still alone, still unseen, still responsible for earning the love you long for." When it comes, don't fight with it and don't surrender to it. Simply recognize it for what it is and gently say, "This is the numbness speaking. This is the numbness speaking. This is not the truth." The old wound will always try to convince you that you are standing outside of love, looking in. But the truth has never changed. You are the beloved. You have never been standing at the edge of God's heart. You have always been held at the very center of it, even during the seasons when you could not feel His presence. There is quiet freedom in naming the wound instead of becoming it. The moment you stop treating every fearful thought as reality, it begins to lose its grip on your heart. Like fog disappearing beneath the morning sun, those old beliefs slowly fade, and the love that has surrounded you all along finally has room to reach you again. I've seen what happens when a heart begins to receive after years of simply surviving. Someone who spent most of their life carrying everyone else eventually discovered that the deepest change wasn't that more people suddenly loved them. It was that, for the first time, they could actually feel the love that had been patiently waiting for them all along. Nothing around them had changed overnight. The people who cared had been there all along. What changed was the heart that had spent so many years protecting itself. And when those walls finally softened, tears came. Not because something was ending, but because something was ending. But because something beautiful had finally been allowed to enter. Chosen one, that kind of healing isn't reserved for a few extraordinary people. It is what naturally begins to unfold when a weary heart no longer believes it has to stay guarded every moment of every day. Sometimes the greatest miracle is simply becoming safe enough to receive what has always been yours. Before we bring this message to a close, I want to invite you into a quiet moment with me. Wherever you are, allow your shoulders to relax. Take one slow breath in, then gently let it go. There is nowhere else you need to be for the next few moments. Now picture yourself standing beneath a gentle rain. This isn't a storm. It is soft, steady, and peaceful. Every drop carries the love of God, and that rain has been falling over your life far longer than you ever realized. For years you stood beneath it wearing a coat you didn't even know you had on. It was woven from exhaustion, self-protection, disappointment. and the belief that love always had to be earned before it could be received. That coat kept you alive for a season, but it also kept your heart from feeling what had never stopped surrounding you. Now imagine that heavy coat slowly slipping from your shoulders. There is no struggle, no force, just the quiet relief of laying something down that has become too heavy to carry. Feel the first drops finally touch your skin. Let yourself notice their warmth. This is how God's love has always been reaching toward you. It isn't arriving because you finally became worthy enough. It never stopped falling. Today your heart is simply becoming open enough to recognize what has always been true. Lift your face toward that gentle rain and let it settle into every place that has felt dry for far too long. Take another slow breath. Let gratitude rise naturally instead of trying to force it. Simply acknowledge this quiet truth. You have always been loved, even in the seasons when you believed you had been forgotten. That love survived every unanswered prayer, every lonely night, and every hidden battle you carried without anyone knowing. Now imagine gathering everything you no longer need to carry into your open hands. The fear that you are not enough. The pressure to earn your place. The loneliness that followed you even into crowded rooms. The habit of believing you always had to stay strong. Hold it gently for a moment. As you breathe out, open your hands and let it all fall away. Watch it leave without chasing after it. Feel how much lighter your heart becomes when it is no longer carrying beliefs that were never yours to keep. Some things are meant to be released, not repaired. And now, from that place of quiet freedom, speak these words over your own heart. Let them settle slowly instead of rushing past them. I am loved. I am deeply, personally, completely loved. Not because of what I accomplish, but because of who I am. I loved faithfully even when my own heart felt empty, and heaven never overlooked a single moment. Today, I open my hands, and I open my heart to receive the love that has never stopped reaching for me. If these words resonate with your spirit, leave this declaration in the comments. I am the beloved. Let those words become a gentle reminder every time loneliness tries to rewrite your story. Let them remind the chosen one within you that you are no longer standing outside a love you hope to earn. And receive this final truth before we part. You are not waiting for God to begin loving you. You are waking up to a love that has held you from the very beginning. What you offered during your emptiest season was never forgotten, and neither were you. So stop searching for love somewhere beyond the horizon of your life. It has always been closer than your next breath, steady as gentle rain, patiently waiting for the moment you finally lift your face toward it. Chosen one, you are deeply loved, completely known, and forever held. May that truth remain with you long after these words have faded.